Hi, everyone. So, Deval and Team Dasra have decided to put me in a spot on center stage. No, I was just kidding. Thanks for turning the spotlight on what the sector has to tell you. I'm so fortunate to be talking on behalf of several authors and thousands of contributors. Many of you are in the audience today. And it's your story that I'm going to be sharing in the next few minutes. Your story in numbers. Also want to call out to Ramiz from Catalyst 2030, Pooja, and a number of you in the audience, and of course the team at Dasra who's been a part of this endeavor. So I hope the slides will work for us. Are you able to advance to the next one? Can you all switch to the next one? Yeah. So before we go into what this reveal is going to be about this report, regardless of whether you are from Samaj, Sarkar or Bazaar in the audience, those terms that Rohini Nilekani has introduced us to, three things are clear and I think everyone would agree. The first one is on credibility. Our credibility, sector's credibility, is questioned at every table, at every forum. The ease of doing good. Now what's ease of doing good? Whether it's gathering resources, delivering results, or reporting impact. It just seems to be getting difficult every single day. Even this morning, I am confronted in a WhatsApp group about a report of an organization that may not be in business now, right? And this is Amrit Kal. India is celebrating Amrit Mahotsav, right? India at 75. The contribution of all of us, this sector, not known, not considered, not celebrated. It is exactly these reasons, if we can go to the next slide, it's exactly these reasons that called for urgent action. And some of us came together and said we need to do three things. First, gather and document credible evidence. Two, disseminate these findings in a very objective fashion, far and wide, which is one of the things I'm doing thanks to Dasra here today. And third, engage in constructive dialogue with everyone, with citizens, that is Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. So it all actually started with a phone call 6 months ago. Matthew Cherian, who many of you would know, has spent a lifetime in service for this sector. He said, Pushpa, can you send out a survey to your NGOs? And the next couple of minutes in my usual thing, I was like, what's the purpose? How many questions? Which is the list I should reach out to? 5 minutes into the conversation, I realized this is an opportunity of lifetime. I've spent nearly 12 years trying to get 12,000 nonprofits to feel safe and voluntarily share their story on GuideStar India. And here's an opportunity where the sector says we'll all come together. Let's reach out to nonprofits far and wide, get them to tell their story, and then let's see what that bird's eye view that you wanted us to share, right? I couldn't let this opportunity pass. And the last 6 months, me, my team, and many people from this sector have spent thousands of hours doing this. So what did we do? We talked about making this report, the next slide please, much more comprehensive, starting with the macroeconomic picture of what the sector contributes to the economy, to the GDP, gathering data ground up from nonprofits, covering all thematic areas and geographies representative of the nonprofit population, and then get people in the sector who've been working in thematic areas with deep focus to actually kind of take us through what has happened in the last 75 years, what are those initiatives, the innovations, the institution building, the structures, processes, capacities, systems, the results, right? And even change in legislation. So all of you in this room have been engaged by Dasra at some time or the other, and 3 of these reports have come from the Dasra team, and there's been engagement of experts. So I'm not going to talk about the thematic reports because I think a lot of deliberations are taking place on that. I'm going to briefly touch upon the macroeconomic report and talk to you more about the data we've gathered through the survey. And so, if you can go to the next slide, please. So what is the kind of, the macroeconomic work that's been done? This is from SSCR, a think tank nonprofit in Delhi. they just went about looking at all the publicly available national statistics, including, the system of national accounts that was implemented, the MOSPI report of 2012, the famous 3.3 million organizations that we all keep quoting. And they tried to figure out what is the contribution of the sector to the gross value added in the economy, and what is the percentage of GDP that we contribute. This is important, right? Because then we are able to put in perspective where the sector stands vis-a-vis nation building and national development. These numbers are very conservative. 3,560 billion Indian rupees, or roughly 43 billion USD, or 1.94%. The reason that it is very conservative is we know that the vast number of people who work in this sector are volunteers, taking no payment, or even when you try to impute their value, their contribution, we know that all of us work at deep discount to the market value. So our contribution in monetary terms is anyways undervalued, right? And a lot of it doesn't get counted because in a subsequent slide, I'll be telling you, for many of the small organizations who make up 50% of the sector, a significant source is in-kind contributions. So it never gets counted as rupees. So with this in mind, we still compare, I think, pretty well. The IT sector, right, which is the belle of the ball, is 7.4%, where, a click of few buttons and you can generate a dashboard with their contribution, vis-a-vis the effort that it takes to get this number out, right? Just keep these numbers in mind. Let's now move to the non-profit sector survey. Like it was introduced, we at GuideStar India, who've been working with the sector for over a decade. Next slide, please. We've been working on gathering this data, and we're fortunate that we were guided in this effort by Professor Ankur Sareen, who teaches public policy at IIM Ahmedabad, and his research team. So at every step of the way, to make this really, high quality information, the way it was designed, the data was gathered, it was filtered, analyzed, and the inferences drawn, we've been guided by them. The next slide, please. And what I must say here is that these are only preliminary results, phase 1, just the trailer. Picture abhi baki hai, and I hope DPW next year will give you a much more richer picture with a lot of granular detail, and hopefully by then there would be a dashboard for you to slice and dice the data to inform your decisions about your giving or receiving. So we reached out to 200,000 nonprofits. The biggest public database of government, Niti Aayog, tells you a little more about, more than 150,000, right? 1,000 nonprofits actually responded. And there's almost 6,000 hours of work behind that, because the survey was detailed, 100 plus questions. Some of the data was ready, but people had to dig into their past information. They had to organize team meetings, top 3 programs, top 3 districts, the numbers over the years, right? Split your finances based on source. So a lot of hard work went into it. And we have 851 validated responses. And Poonam is here, I think, from A.T. Chandra Foundation, who have supported us in this effort. She reacted saying that 851 is perhaps the largest respondent base for a survey like this in our country, right? And in phase 2, we hope to cover several more thousand. If we could go to the next slide, please. So there was a lot of requirement on what type of data to gather to kind of paint I won't say a complete picture, but at least reveal what most of us want to know about the sector. So where are organizations working, right? What are the activities? What is the contribution to the SDG? What is the size and composition in terms of the source of funding? What kind of systems of accountability do people have in place? What kind of results do they track and report? What kind of contribution to the workforce is happening in the sector? Partnerships, collaborations that always kind of questioned. And what has been the trend? How badly were we hit by the pandemic? How resilient we are? And what does it look like over the last 5 years and 15 years? So those 106 questions kind of tried to bring this picture. If we can move to the next slide, please. So I'll first talk about geography. Yeah. So we all had guesstimates about the sector, but what we see is that 5 states, including Maharashtra, account for 50% of non-profit work in the country. UP, Delhi, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. We also find that organizations are quite local in their work. 47% work in one state, 31% work in 1 to 5 states. And Mr. Shombi Sharp, the UN Resident Coordinator for India, who launched this report where Deval and I were there at the Jaipur Lit Fest, said that when in India you make this change locally, you're actually making a global impact. To quote him, he says, if India achieves the SDG goals by 2030, half the global goals would have been achieved. So local organizations, and in terms of where the work is happening, 55% in villages, and 50% or more are working in the aspirational districts where the human development indices are really, really low. If you can go to the next slide, please, quickly. So in terms of SDGs, again, this confirms what we would otherwise know: quality education, good health, no poverty, gender equality. These are the popular themes. And you would also see that, most of the organizations are into direct implementation, 70%, and 94% are working where the need is very high in terms of the population being underprivileged or the region being underserved. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at the composition of the sector, I already said 50% are small organizations with annual spending of less than 50 lakh, 62% less than a crore. And we keep talking about millennials and Gen Zs. 87% NGOs are Gen Zs and millennials. They are young organizations, which means agility, openness, they're digital natives, etc., right? So there's a lot of opportunity to work with nonprofits. I was at the Apnalaya 50th year birthday celebration. So it's not just the young organizations are digitally active, but the kind of data you have on East Ward and that Apnalaya plans to take to the other 10 wards of Mumbai. There's a lot of data that's going to be gathered, produced, evidence in the sector. So if we can go, in terms of expenditure, yeah, I told you 62% are less than a crore. Next slide, please. Yeah. Sources of funds. So the smaller organizations, their key source of funding is self-generated revenue, retail donations, in-kind contributions. And as some of the members in this audience would already know, the mid-size 1 to 5 crore and the larger organization are popular with you for supporting, but we hope with the Rebuild India program, a lot of attention is also paid to the smaller organizations in a journey of growth with them. Next one, please. This was really interesting and very exciting for me, and I'm glad that, Professor Ankur Sareen wanted to introduce a bunch of questions around this. What is the kind of change nonprofits? We heard 50% are local and working in aspirational districts and villages. They are making a difference to the local economy. It's a story of half and half and two-thirds. Let me unpack that. Half of the organizations are the key source of formal employment in half of the geographies where they work. Key source of formal employment in half of the key geographies that they work. Half of them, right, are working with local businesses, meaning half of their economic activity, for half the organizations, half of the economic activity is engaging local businesses and vendors. So, while you may be wearing your philanthropic hat today, this also makes immense business sense, and all of us are integrated and nation building happens this way. The two-thirds story is that we find that half of the organizations, two-thirds of the organizations employ people from the local communities or the local geographies where they work. And in two-thirds of organizations, the person who has employment with the nonprofit is the sole breadwinner. And again, like, I'm referring to Apnalaya because you're there and that's fresh in my memory from the weekend, but we heard stories of how a nonprofit becomes, helps the sole breadwinner or takes the family up the value chain. So this is the contribution of the sector. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of conversation that happens in the sector and outside that we don't engage with government or we don't engage with one another. And the data tells us something else, right? Nonprofits are working with government institutions, the PHCs, the Anganwadis, the municipalities, right? All of that. So strong partnerships, and it's the bang for a buck you get when you actually work with nonprofits, because they are working so closely with government institutions, though the narrative outside sounds pretty different. If we can go to the next slide. Collaborations. And I know that some people here want to study the CSO coalition as a collaborative experiment. There are people doing PhDs on collaboration, and I don't know if Sheena is here studying about collaborations. And what we realized is, and I, in my 2 decades in the sector, often hear that you NGOs are competitive. But what we are seeing is there's a lot of collaboration among NPOs. The bigger ones are within the networks. And we also see collaboration with business and government is quite significant in the mid to the large-sized organizations. And these collaborations means that we can really scale up and make a difference to the nation. The next one, please. So what happened due to COVID and otherwise in the last 5 years? Actually, there has been a growth in nonprofits. There's been a growth in the source of funding. Yes, COVID did hit people. 64% of NGOs said that they had staff attrition. The smaller and the medium-sized, as everyone would guess, were more hard hit, but people have survived. Organizations have survived, even though, and there's a lot of philanthropic giving and collective effort that has helped. Next slide, please. So how can we use these findings? If you are a regulator, and I hope some of you are there in this room, or an ecosystem builder, if you can change the slide, please, you can actually use this data. I'm going to be at the SSC Advisory Committee meeting next week. And when we were trying to decide the cutoff size for the social stock exchange, at that time we put a figure threshold of 50 lakh, because through our experience, it was still a good guess that 50% of NGOs would be less than 50 lakh. Now this data corroborates that. Now regulators can see, again, when we were advising Maharashtra government for charity administration reforms, you're able to apply the 80-20 rule because data shows you that. Organizations above 5 crore have certain capacities, their circle of influence is such that you can ask for more data perhaps, right? And they have the wherewithal to put systems to track and report much more. Why not spare organizations less than 1 crore budget to get these systems in place and spend more time on work than admin and reporting? So we can apply this data now pretty confidently, though it is preliminary results. They are very much in line with what we used to pull out earlier. And for NPOs in the room, I think I heard in the previous panel, people are asked to do the elevator pitch presentations. In your pitch presentations, use this data to show the unmet gap. Use this data to say what nonprofits of your size are doing, what your needs are. Use this data, what has been the trend in the sector, right? Use this data to do benchmarking. And I would say for the funders, again, what I mentioned for the regulators and ecosystem builders, now you have fresh data with you. The macroeconomic data is there, the nonprofit data is there, and the thematic reports, which I didn't talk about. I think all these 3 put together, and if they're available, and we will make them all public shortly, we have a QR code where you can register now to express your interest. And I presented the findings today. The narrative and the detailed report is all towards the finishing stage, and we'll share it with you at the right time. We'll partner with organizations here to, pull out specific narratives out of it. I think Smarnita from IDR is here. Maybe you want to come on board to help us socialize and, use your communication skills for audiences to digest nuggets of this information. For those of you who want to research, it's public good now available. And we still need more people to join this. We are, I think, as of this morning, 16 people in the coalition. I hope more people will come forward. We need volunteers, we need collaborators, we need, there's so many pieces to it. Gathering the information, disseminating and engaging people. So I'm available for partnerships and collaborations after that. Ramesh is here from Catalyst, and thanks. Thank you very much again, Deval. 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 Thank you very much again, And I hope with this 15 minutes being in the spotlight has helped me to tell the story of, over the million missions, as we call it. And I hope I have sparked some curiosity, and you will register to download the report. Thank you, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.